In the summer of 1954, 22 11-year-old boys went to summer camp in Oklahoma and came home different people. Not because of anything that happened to them, because of what they did to each other. Within 48 hours of meeting, they had raided each other's cabins in the middle of the night, burned each other's flags, and filled socks with rocks to use as weapons. Staff had to physically separate them when a fistfight broke out in the dining hall. Every single one of these boys had been hand-selected by researchers specifically because they were the most psychologically stable, well-adjusted kids they could find. The researchers screened out anyone who seemed aggressive, impulsive, or troubled. This is the Robbers Cave experiment. Muzafer Sherif had one question that he had been chasing his entire life. Where does group hatred actually come from? Not what it looks like once it's running, not how to stop it after, where it starts, what switches it on. He had watched the Second World War end and looked at the wreckage and decided that everything people said about hatred, that it came from ancient grievances, cultural difference, years of propaganda, was missing the real mechanism. Sherif believed hatred between groups needed almost nothing to run. Two groups, one prize, no way for both to win. That was the whole engine. He called it realistic conflict theory, and he spent years trying to build an experiment clean enough to prove it. The first attempt was the summer of 1953 at a camp in Middle Grove, New York. Sherif brought in a group of boys, split them into two groups, gave them a week to bond, then introduced a tournament. He waited for the hatred to appear. It didn't. The boys stayed friendly. When Sherif had his research assistants steal their clothes, smash their instruments, and blame the other group, the boys figured out something was wrong and decided it was the adults, not each other. In July 1953, in the woods outside Middle Grove at midnight, Sherif got drunk and got into a fistfight with his own research assistants because 11-year-old boys had seen through his experiment and refused to cooperate with it. He shelved the records, told almost nobody the study had happened, but he knew exactly what had gone wrong. The boys had met each other before the competition started. They had formed friendships across group lines, and when the pressure came, those friendships were stronger than the structure he had built. Sherif had one fix. If you want a group to hate a stranger, don't let them meet the stranger first. In the summer of 1954, he tried again. 22 boys, middle class, Protestant, every single one of them IQ screened and psychologically evaluated before selection, were told they were going to a Boy Scout summer camp at Robbers Cave State Park in southeastern Oklahoma. Their parents signed consent forms. The consent forms said nothing about a psychological experiment. The boys' counselors were trained research assistants. The handyman doing maintenance around the camp was Muzafer Sherif. The two groups arrived on different days. For that first week, each group did everything together. Hiking, swimming, cooking over a fire, with no contact with the other side of camp. And in that week, without anyone designing it, something started happening in both cabins. The boys started becoming a unit. One cabin named themselves the Eagles, the other named themselves the Rattlers. They made flags, an eagle on one, a rattlesnake on the other. They staked out territory. They built routines. The Rattlers started cursing constantly as a kind of group identity marker, a way of defining themselves against whoever might be out there. The Eagles developed a norm against swearing. Two entirely separate cultures, built from scratch in 7 days, by boys who had all been strangers on a bus. Then, Sherif introduced the tournament. A week of competition, baseball, tug-of-war, touch football, with trophies and a jackknife as prizes. One group would win everything. The other would get nothing. The first time the two groups sat down in the same dining hall, the name-calling started within minutes. Stinkers, braggers, sissies, cheaters. By the end of the first meal, neither group wanted to share the space. The Eagles asked if they could eat separately. Within 48 hours, the Rattlers had raided the Eagles' cabin in the middle of the night, overturned beds, ripped the mosquito netting off the windows, scattered belongings across the floor, and stolen a pair of jeans belonging to the Eagles' group leader. The next morning, the Rattlers painted those jeans orange, wrote the last of the Eagles across them, and carried them through camp as a flag. The Eagles retaliated that night. They raided the Rattlers' cabin, overturned what was left to overturn, scattered dirt across the floor. Then they went back to their own cabin and spent the next hour filling socks with rocks, tying off the ends, and sliding them under their cots, because they knew the Rattlers would be coming back, and they intended to be ready. A fistfight broke out in the dining hall, and staff had to physically pull boys apart. The two groups refused to eat in the same building. When researchers asked each boy to rate the members of the other group, every single boy ranked the other side below average. Boys who had been friends on the bus ride to Oklahoma, who had laughed and talked for 4 hours before the camp even started, now looked at those same kids across the dining hall and saw enemies. The staff recorded 78 hostile incidents in the 8 days of competition. That number excludes the songs, the insults, and the meals that had to end early. Just the raids, the property destruction, and the violence. Think about the last time you were put on a team for something. A company, a school, a side in an argument online. You probably didn't choose the people. You were just put there. And at some point you noticed yourself thinking of those people differently, defending them when they were criticized, assuming the best when they made a mistake, and looking at the other side and doing the exact opposite. For almost all of human history, your survival was literally tied to which group you belonged to. Not in a metaphorical sense. In the sense that if your group rejected you, you were alone in the dark, without fire, without anyone to watch your back. The brain that tracked in-group and out-group obsessively, that gave the benefit of the doubt to its own people and withheld it from strangers, that brain survived. The brain that didn't was selected out. What the boys at Robbers Cave showed is how little it needs to activate. They didn't need a history of conflict. They didn't need real differences. They needed a name, eagles or rattlers, and 7 days alone before the other group arrived. That was enough to form a pack. The moment the tournament started, the brain stopped seeing 11-year-old boys who liked baseball. It saw competitors. And competitors, in the brain's oldest language, are a threat to the resources your group needs to survive. The boys who burned the flag weren't cruel kids. The boys who threw food in the dining hall weren't disturbed. They were your brain, running exactly as designed, in a situation that was engineered to make it run. The Eagles' wins were proof the Eagles were superior. The Rattlers' wins were proof the Rattlers cheated. Same tournament, same games, two completely different realities. Because the filter your brain puts on information once it has decided who is yours and who isn't doesn't ask for your permission before it starts working. Here is what Sherif published, and here is what he didn't. What he published was the third phase, the reconciliation. After the competition, researchers introduced a series of problems that could only be solved if both groups cooperated. A water supply truck broke down, a camp vehicle got stuck in the mud, and needed everyone to pull it free. The movie the whole camp wanted to see could only be screened if both groups pooled their money. These were called superordinate goals, shared stakes big enough that the in-group/out-group divide had to be suspended to achieve them. And they worked. Boys who had been raiding cabins 2 weeks earlier were sitting together at meals. The experiment ended with both groups choosing to ride home on the same bus. Sherif published that the reconciliation, the proof that competition manufactures hatred and cooperation can dissolve it. This became one of the most cited findings in the history of social psychology. Conflict resolution programs, peacekeeping frameworks, international relations theory, all of it touched by the Robbers Cave result. Teachers still teach it. Governments still reference it. What Sherif did not publish was Middle Grove, the 1953 study where the boys refused to turn on each other, where they figured out the manipulation, where they aimed their anger at the researchers instead of each other, sat in an archive for 60 years. A journalist and psychologist named Gina Perry found it in 2018 while researching her book, The Lost Boys. She found Sherif's field notes. She found the record of what he had decided wasn't worth reporting. The Middle Grove boys hadn't failed the experiment. They had revealed something Sherif didn't want the result to be. The only variable separating the two outcomes was whether the boys had been allowed to know each other before the competition started. Cross-group friendships formed before the pressure came held when the pressure arrived. Sherif had isolated that variable, eliminated it from the 1954 design, and then published the 1954 result as though Middle Grove had never happened. He reported the outcome where the structure won. He buried the outcome where the people did. The Eagles and the Rattlers rode home on the same bus. They chose to sit together, the trip back was fine, and most of them never saw each other again. What they were for those 3 weeks was not who they were, but it wasn't fake either. The flag that burned was ash. The fist fight in the dining hall was real. The boys who slid those rock-filled socks under their cots were not performing. They were afraid, and they were ready. The structure Sherif built didn't create something new in those kids. It found something that was already there and gave it a target. And the same thing that was in them is in you. In every group you've ever been put in, every side you've ever been assigned, every comment section you've ever watched turn into a war between people who started the day as strangers. Your brain already has its flags picked out. It's just waiting for someone to tell it who the other cabin is.